Welcome to Aging with Dignity. I'm your host, Versha. Today on Aging with Dignity, we're talking about something we all want, not just to live longer, but to live better. Because the truth is, most of us don't seriously think about how we'll age until we're suddenly helping a parent navigate the consequences or we find ourselves immersed in it ourselves. Because aging well isn't about pushing harder or pretending we're still 30. It's about learning how to move differently, how to listen to our bodies, and how to stay strong, steady, and confident as the years go by. And really, this conversation goes far beyond fitness for seniors. It's about something much bigger: longevity, brain health, and the decisions we make today that shape how we will age tomorrow. For many in the sandwich generation, this question is becoming very real. They're caring for aging parents while raising their own families and quietly asking themselves something much deeper: how do I make sure I don't become a burden to my own children? What science is showing us now is that strength, balance, and mobility aren't just about staying upright. They're closely connected to brain health, nervous system regulation, neuroplasticity, and our ability to remain independent later in life. Today, I'm joined by Tamara Williams, founder of Innergetic, a studio dedicated to helping people improve balance, mobility, and overall well being through movement and therapeutic practices. At first glance, what happens in Tamara's studios might look like movement training, but underneath, it's something much more profound: a way to protect the brain, preserve autonomy, and build a body that supports you for decades to come. And a quick note to our listeners: this is one of those episodes you may want to watch as well as listen to. We'll be sharing video from Tamara's studio where you'll see her clients in action. They're not there simply to work out, they're there to connect and reconnect with their bodies, reduce their fear of falling, and rebuild the kind of strength that supports everyday life. So today, Tamara will walk us through how she created this program and therapy she uses, and why the work of aging may need to start earlier than most of us think. Let's begin. Tamara, thank you for joining us today and for welcoming us earlier in your space at the studio. To my audiences, you will see the beautiful studio and how a client of hers is finding new strength if you're watching this episode on YouTube. But before we jump into that, Tamara, can you tell us a little bit about how Energetic came to be? Can you take us back to the beginning? What was happening in your own life, your work life, your personal space that led you to realize that this kind of program was really needed?
Thank you, Varsha. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. But the journey, I feel like it's ongoing. That's what I like to tell people. It never ends. If it ends, then you're dead, right? Life is over. And so for myself, I spent a lot of many years in the healthcare system working. I started in pharmaceuticals. I went on to working within the IT area of healthcare, automating our systems, really trying to help the governments reduce their costs, knowing that their budgets were continuously blowing up every single year, and never really finding the right budget for what we want to do for healthcare. And so, that was a cross point in my life where I said, I spent so much time going to school, understanding the body, the anatomy, and always looking for more. And I really felt that there was a real limitation in terms of how I was going to be able to help people. Because if the government was my clients and they were the ones who were going to say, we'll sign off on a contract, their response is always that we don't have budget to invest in something like this, which is alarming because we want to be able to do something at the beginning rather than having to respond. And many of the systems here in Canada, let alone in Quebec, the healthcare system is not well supported. And so waiting to react is actually costing the healthcare system and our taxpayers so much more in the long term if we don't address it earlier on. And that's when I had my own personal experience with, trying to understand my body. And I explored working with who's my mentor now, but a holistic practitioner. And I went in with an open mind saying, I don't have any real issues to address. I'm just curious to know what's going on in my body and is there a different approach that I should be taking? And to my surprise, he asked me the very first question and he said, We go through the questionnaires, we go through why are you here, but I didn't really have something concrete to say I need to fix this. I might have a goal to just be well, but I didn't know that I was going there to address a real issue. And the first question he asked me was, "Are you happy?" And this is me. You get it as it is on a daily basis. So to really think that I'm introverted would be another discussion. But the real question of are you happy? And I strive for continuous development and growth. So for me, I've always invested in myself. Now, to turn it around and look and say, but are you really taking care of yourself is really what I understood when he asked me that question. And that was the first day in 2017 in February, after hosting and doing my own girls retreat, but it was really turning inwards and asking ourselves the hard questions. And I showed up there on a Monday, and it was the first day, and I never turned around and I never looked back. But it was the first time that I found there was a what I believed healthcare was supposed to do, which is prevention. I truly believe preventative care is the foundation for supporting any healthcare system. And that's what he was opening the door for me to understand, that it's not just everything else that we proclaim we're doing for wellness. It's, are you also taking care of your mind at the end of the day? How's your nervous system responding? And 6 months later, I turned around, I asked him, "Can I do this as well? Or are you just super gifted?" And he looked at me and he said, "No, I think you can definitely do this." And that was the day where I realized if I want to help people moving forward, they need to be equally invested in whatever care plan goes forward, which also means who you choose to bring along on this journey. It's not about multiple diplomas, it's about, do you feel comfortable that they will help you evolve and bring you to where you want to be? And that's when I decided to sign up, become an osteopath, and really introduced myself into the holistic, if not preventative way of healthcare. So all of that to say that it took many years to really understand what's the problem with our healthcare system today. And really, we've lived it in the last few years, but the mandate is treat the symptoms. And when they come in with the symptoms, then you have something to do. But ideally, because we don't all have family doctors, if we address it in our lifestyle little by little, then we don't end up going to the doctors when our body is crashing and we have no idea. Ideally, we get to see them and intervene a lot sooner before we have the ripple effects of the different things that we weren't able to identify sooner. So prevention is really important. And full circle, when I did all of that, the pandemic happened, and we had the opportunity to acquire a rebounding studio. And their mantra was really, hey, this is a fun way to work out. And when we had the opportunity to look into acquiring the fitness studio, then that's when I opened my reality and realizing, wow, NASA conducted a study, and their study shows how efficient rebounding is with just 5 minutes, let alone compared to doing something rigorous like running, for example. So their study showed that it is rebounding is 68% more efficient than running. So you can imagine, as an osteopath, I'm going, wait a minute, we should be doing so much more with this. And we are not. And so when we acquired the studio, we changed the approach to really use it as a rehabilitation tool, a way to help people to create movement where they're no longer stagnant or no longer able to move with pain, right? And so when we combine osteopathy plus now the approach with rebounding, we open the doors for accessibility. We can now cater specifically from a therapeutic and a cardiovascular strength training approach as well, all in one, while using one tool. So for the any individual who says, I don't have time to take care of myself, I can have somebody 5 minutes on the rebounder, and it's fun. And they don't know that in the back end, you're also checking off the boxes for therapeutic benefits in addition to what you're doing for your cardiovascular health as well. So that's really the journey. And it's really been my tool to help me survive the pandemic, different lifestyle, not even lifestyle, sorry, life milestones that change that normally would have us panicking or responding and reacting. And this really gave me an opportunity to really work on myself, but even deeper than that is having control of what I can control. So, my nervous system. And I can understand when my nervous system needed to relax and take a break, or when my nervous system was ready to tackle everything, or giving myself more space to take a break. But that's ultimately the gold at the end of the of the rainbow, if you will. Because if you can feel empowered and in control of your health, there's one step closer to being in control of life, because the external we don't control, but the inside is really, playing field for everybody to get a good handle. So that for me is when the concept of me being an osteopath and a single practitioner came into play. And then it opened the doors to really creating a safe place through energetic and the center to really bloom and recognize that it's a safe place for people to come and take care of themselves, but really their nervous system.
Fascinating. That's a really interesting career trajectory that you've had. Um, And it shows us also that life is not always a straight and narrow path. You've had little kinks and turns, but you've pulled it together really interestingly. Um, and you started this journey by looking inward, which I find very, very important because you've now got the firsthand lived experience as you start to coach others. Y- you're still fairly young, but your practice is focused not exclusively, but somewhat on with programs for older adults. If we step back, is this really about fitness? Is this what we're talking about? Or is this something different, something about longevity and maybe protecting our brain health differently?
Great point. I like to say more than everything else, and what I love about rebounding, it's inclusive for all ages. But coming back to the areas that we focus a lot on is neurodivergent individuals, and a lot of people look at it and they're going, "Oh well, maybe I was supposed to be diagnosed, but we never got diagnosed." And you can definitely see how it's the seniors who are probably living a life without knowing that they may have had some sort of neuro something that was going on. But the thing that's very evident is that as we age, every single milestone in terms of ages, right? We focus at, within the first year, this is the key milestones that people need to hit to ensure that we can rule out any other developmental issues. Now, the bridge is what happens after life transition. So when you start retirement, or when your reality starts to look like, oh, my life is changing, that's automatically what we feel, right? That's the first thing that I tell people you have to accept. You're no longer in an older version of your body. So the reason why I think it's more than just fitness is because that milestone gap between your regular functioning, your routines, what they're used to. Imagine most seniors have been in a job where they were there for 50 years, if anything, and they retired from the same companies that they worked in. Now, that transition that we miss is, what support do seniors need when they shut off the working hat and need to transition into retirement? And the biggest fear is because they don't have a routine. And the brain is waiting for, I like to always say, the nervous system isn't a one shot deal. It's waiting on the consistency. It knows what is coming next. That's how we train our brain. That repetitive, either, routine plays a huge role in the brain, and how, what they say, if you don't exercise it, you lose it. And the brain is a massive muscle. And I think that's what we miss. We prepare for longevity thinking, you know, is the individual in their body going to be able to go through the life transitions? If we went one step further, the question is the individual being stimulated enough to go through the life transitions? And because they lose that routine, their brain function, that's where we start to see the changes, and it diminishes and so on and so forth. Not even to we haven't even touched on like the biochemical changes that are happening at that age. And so, more than just a workout, when we're rebounding, it plays a lot on the vestibular system and what happens with proprioceptors as well. And so, once we integrate that whole concept in terms of neuroplasticity, then directly with rebounding, it creates it creates the motor and the sensory input between the head and the feet and everything else in between. And so that creates the stimulation in the brain that we're hoping to have, post retirement. It's just that we're not in that routine. So we look at it completely different and we feel lost. But in essence, the fitness part of it is the routine. If they can know that they're committed into something on a weekly basis, it also changes their output in terms of what they're looking forward to, in terms of, do I have a purpose to wake up the next day?
Yeah, so this is interesting. Many we've all heard stories when, especially in previous generations, when folks would retire, as you said, very much the routine of waking up and going to work and having something to do and coming back home is gone. So we have to replace that with a new routine, is what I'm hearing. Um, that, of course, is very much about brain functioning. Um, and you're suggesting that bringing routine into the physicality will help with rebalancing us. What if? So I guess there's two or three areas on the spectrum. You've got those who have transitioned into that phase of life where they no longer have the previous hectic work routine lifestyle. Um, whether it be that they were going out to work or working at home as a homekeeper, but now life has transitioned. Children have grown up, and they're taking a slower pace. Those who have not been active, physically active by working out, um, need to look at something like this. What about people at the other end who have remained physically active? They've been active playing sports, they've been active going to the gym. This generation is much more into it. Um, do they benefit from these kinds of therapies that you offer at your studio?
Great question. I do think that, you know, the body needs to train in various different areas. So, sometimes it's cardiovascular, it's the yoga, it's the breathing, it's the mindfulness, it's everything social as well. And so, when you look at that and we tell people, you should be training in every single aspect, whether flexibility, something strength, another is cardiovascular, you're going, okay, wait a minute, that's going to be overwhelming for an individual. And so, we also have to understand that people will respond when they feel safe or when they don't feel the pressure for growth. And that being at the forefront of designing our programs allows people to recognize that you can do many different things to be active. Now, change in your type of activity will challenge the body differently. So, for example, looking at rebounding, one of the things when I talk about neuroplasticity and why I think it helps more than telling somebody go to a gym and work out for an hour is like I have direct ability to work, let's say, the way the left side of the brain is communicating with the right side of the body, right? So when we do compact movement or have somebody do multitask on a rebounder, so it could be weights, it could be, opposite body, midline crossing, all these fun things. That's what we're hoping to get more reach and helping to improve through rebounding. So it's not that it will replace absolutely everything that somebody's doing, but if they're already very active and they're not necessarily targeting the way that we need to receive information sensory from the body to build what we want to work on from the cognitive function, if you will, that's where I believe a lot of people will benefit from integrating more than one thing at once. What I like about rebounding is that you can again do all the different layers of, let's call it, what brings wellness to an individual, and you can do it all in one step. So, 5 minutes at a very basic level, if they're moving, now I'm going, okay, from a therapeutic standpoint, are we addressing things that you might not be doing in your other workout? And it's really, when we talk about the neuroplasticity side of things, it's improving the movement of the liquids in the body where it has all of the biochemical information, that feeds the feedback loop in the body, and how our body responds. That is extremely key to then having an impact on the brain and how our body receives those receptors to then take into consideration another action. So, that looks like the lymphatic system, the immune system. So, as we get older, we worry about compromised immune systems. And so even if I take a step back, somebody who engages at 5 minutes at a very basic movement at home, then that approach is really to target things like the immune system versus, cardiovascular training and strength training.
So, a lot of our listeners are actually caring for their aging parents while also probably raising their own children. They're watching what decline actually looks like. They're seeing it up close. How does the work you do here help someone who's in that sandwich generation future proof themselves? Is there space for them? Is there something that they can do now to help prevent them falling into that repetitive pattern?
I always position rebounding as the tool that anybody in the family can use. And I think there's two things when we talk about longevity. I think one of the first things that we notice is disability threshold. And really, it's, when we look at traditional fitness, we look at the muscles and we focus on things like that, but we still discredit the nervous system, right? And then the other part is like our functional reserve. What is our capacity to really improve our wellness? Is it more than looking good, right? Um, but with the disability threshold, we tend to have the notion of, and we probably see it nowadays a lot with, call it the bubble wrap parent and so on and so forth. But ultimately what we're really trying to do is, the second we internalize that I'm getting old mentality, typically that's when we start to see the decline. And the reality is we embrace that, and so we live it. And so the rebound therapy originally started in the UK in the 70s with a physiotherapist who was using the tool to help neurodivergent individuals and people who were just as far as being wheelchair bound. So just to give you the scope of how does this work, I think the story just changes depending on where you are at that point in time. So if you're that sandwich generation where you're already taking care of a child with special needs and then having to worry about an aging population or an aging parent, then you're really going, oh, I'm pulled, right? But you're taxed in terms of your energy. And I like to just bring it back to, how's your nervous system feeling? What we're telling people is, we want you to act from a place where your nervous system thinks that the bottle on your table is a lying 24/7. So you're waiting and anticipating for something wrong to happen. It could be either with the child or your parent at home. They fall. What am I going to do? So your body's literally holding in that fear. And then we see they're embodying this outcome. Now, I think if people were looking for different ways that were not, I would say this is not your standard treatment or therapy or integration for movement. So it's really about, okay, sharing your time and your energy, right? If you had one tool that would resolve the majority of the issues in all three generations at this point, I think that's the beauty of rebounding, and it will address disability threshold because you can realize that it will help regulate everybody's nervous system. So beyond even the physical, once your body feels that, oh, this is what it's like to be relaxed, and I can feel my body shutting off, and I can feel like I'm getting real rest, then we're going, oh, that's amazing. But for that sandwich generation parent, for example, who's dealing with both ends, I don't think your priority is going to be, how much working out am I going to do? But you will recognize that you have chronic fatigue, inflammation that might be creeping up, but you don't know where it's coming from. And mainly because you've done all the diagnostic testing and they've told you everything's clear. So what do you do with that information? You went through the standard, recourse of getting the doctor, doing the diagnostic testing. Do I need to intervene and have a specialist? But when all comes back clean and there's no deeper issue except for taking care of yourself, um, then that helps people to really take a break and recognize what in my life is not working. And I think that's the future proofing for the generations to come next, is that they don't want to leave a burden on their kids. And if their kids are in a boat where they're not independent, that means that likely there will be a caregiver for their whole entire life. up until that moment when they pass as well. So I think, when we talk about how can we use this for everybody, but specifically the future proofing it for the sandwich generation, I think it's more a question that in that point in time, we need something to help with the chronic fatigue. That will take care of it. It will give you all the other benefits, but it will also help you manage so that you can literally have a relaxed nervous system and respond not with like a what's going on. And it's really you have time to create new capacity to deal with both ends of your caregiving or caregiver or your caregiver responsibilities.
Tamara, is it a choice um, that people have to make between rebounding and fitness? Like, is it either or?
I don't, it's not either or. I think it's end.
Okay. So they could supplement with it. So when you're talking about aging healthy, what does that actually mean to you physically, mentally, emotionally? And how is that different from, as we were just talking about, just staying active if they're playing tennis or they're golfing or they're out going for walks or whatnot?
Great question. I think, at least for myself, when I talk about, holistic health, for me, it's understanding that we are addressing one individual in a bigger ecosystem. And when we look at that ecosystem, it's yes, physical, but I've also seen people in instances where they do all of the things that are required for them, but they still don't feel like they're recovering. That to me is like the low hanging fruit, that it's bigger than just what we're physically used to addressing. If there's physical pain, we address it. But what if there's no physical pain? Right? What if there's nothing concrete for us to address? So this is where I do believe health prevention is more important than anything else. And health prevention me is the green card, if you will, to say explore the yoga, explore the walking, explore the community connections and your socializing. Um, Again, nutrition, right? Explore what that really means. Explore what you're eating. Explore if you're sleeping enough. Explore the water. I don't think it's one mold fits all. And even with what we do at the center, we take the time in our initial assessments to ensure that we've addressed everything, because in a world where somebody might say this pain came out of nowhere, I always tell people two things. Either the pain was there, we just didn't feel it, and that's a nervous system not, resting, or it's an emotional component. And I want to disclaimer it. I'm not a psychologist. I don't do talk therapy, but I am a coach and I am a lifestyle coach as well. And when people come to see me, it's because they don't really know what to do. And we don't have the tools within our healthcare system to help people feel empowered. But if they were feeling empowered that they can really take control of their health, then the other is true on that, is that then they're willing to open the door and do something. Because at the end of the day, doing something is better than doing nothing, right? And the doing nothing part is what's degrading our health, really. And so once we pull that in together and we look at it, it's not just movement. And I don't think it could ever be movement. I think if we look at our healthcare system right now, you have a GP who then you go in to see, I can't do it. I'm going to refer you to somebody else. They can't figure out. They refer you to someone else. And that GP who's a center with that patient should be following up with the different specialists. But we're saying, here's one person. And if it's a mental thing, you go here. If it's a gastro thing, you're going here. If it's cancer, you go here. But then there's nobody in the center who brings everybody back together to say, what's our plan for the individual? The individual is still lost and they don't have more tools, they have more questions, if anything. And so I think when we talk about holistic, and it's a trendy thing nowadays, and we talk about nervous system regulation and neurodiversity and all these fun things, the real inclusion is when we see that individual and we understand, oh, when you go home, what's your level of stress? Is your work contributing to your stress? Are you in healthy relationships? Are you isolated? Do you have a community to connect with? Once we put all of that into play, then I can say you have won the lottery with being healthy.
Got it. Um, So we've heard you talk about neuroplasticity, and it's creeping into a lot of our conversations here on Aging with Dignity. Um, when you talk about rebound therapies, just to clarify for the audience who will see it later on with some of the clips that we've done in your studio, you're talking about mini trampolines. Can jumping on a mini trampoline really just change the brain? Sorry to be so simplistic with it, but is there a correlation between the two?
And it's a great honest question when you're going, really though, how? And so and
Exactly.
so when I made reference to the things that we need to communicate and them utilizing the same path, when as an osteopath, one of our biggest foundations, if you will, is creating mobility, not just for mobility, but really because when we create mobility, things like the lymphatic system, for example, there is no other mechanism except for moving, and it happens through gravity and through creating the movement. So, yes, you can have the same effect, if you will, by walking. That will create the same movement that we need to have the lymphatic system flow. And then that's what will send the message in, if you will, to the brain. And it will remove any toxins or that will be creating inflammation in the brain. And then it circulates and we eliminate it. Now, rebounding by itself, I always say, well, what if there's something greater that's stopping the body from moving the liquids beyond the fact that somebody might not be moving? And I think that's where it becomes interesting because yes, we need our hands, and our role is to create that movement in someone's body so that we could have a response of the blood and the lymphatic system moving through the body that in essence, if you're not moving it, it just doesn't happen. So we get to go in and we say when we don't have liquids that are moving in the joints, that just creates more inflammation. And that's when people will present with disease or dis-ease, but really, if we have to call it out, it looks like arthritis, right? If we look at those who are going to say that they no longer move because the pain is there, it's also that we need to create the movement so that we can reverse the effects of the inflammation as well. Now, that being said, just rebounding, it's low impact. So I can actually, in conjunction with osteo and me being able to physically treat, I can address the parts of the body that are literally stuck, quote unquote, and not allowing liquids to pass. So that might be a systemic inflammation issue. So anywhere the inflammation is, whether it's in the joints, whether it's in the body systems that are all interconnected and related, my brain is the one that's going, okay, well, if this, and that's the long connection. Now, put that together with movement, then I can finally have somebody who's hopeful to say, oh, wow, I can move. There's no more pain. And once we get them at that point, then I'm going, your rebounder is your way to not have to come see me every month, for example. It will prolong people's treatments because they're doing on the rebounder what I would do in treatment. So
Got it.
just rebounding, I do believe again, there's more things to address. Now, if somebody said I only got 5 minutes for one thing, my answer would still be rebounding just because it will also do the work that I do with my hands while I'm not there. So people will be able to rehabilitate themselves into creating, better posture. Okay, now I have better posture. Great. I can actually use muscles that may have not been facilitated before, but on a rebounder, it will engage all the muscles in your body. So at least I know whether I'm there or not, and you're lightly doing something with support, it will turn on the right muscles and turn off the wrong muscles at the same time. And then you can really use your hip flexors, your pelvis tilts, having more movement. But the best thing is it's painless. And so I can't get most people to be convinced to say wellness means you got to run a marathon. Let's just take a simple step back, bring it back to the basics, get on the rebounder, but at least you feel that it's low impact. You feel that you don't have the same level of pain after because the liquids are moving. You don't have the same inflammation post workout burn, if you will. And once they go through all of that, they're going, oh my goodness, I who would have thought that a couple minutes on a rebounder would address so many different factors. So, the simple version is just rebounding. No, because I don't think for an individual to be healthy, it's just about movement. It's about what we can conquer at the same time that's more therapeutic at the same time.
It's fascinating, and thank you for that. It's interesting because I know you've shown me and told me um, stories where people have been in wheelchairs or they've been with walkers. They've had difficulty just simply taking a couple of steps, but after having gone through some of the therapies with you, they've been back to being able to take control of their lives and being able to work. And one word that nobody likes to say as we get older, but is often thought, is that we don't want to be a burden. So being able to have that independence, that sense of control, that I can take a walk and not fall. I can take a walk and do my groceries. I can take a walk and get to my car to drive. These are things I can take a walk and hug my grandchild. Right. These are things that give us that sense of confidence. We are filming in your studio as well with older adults in action. These are not models. These are not athletes. These are real people. What kind of changes do you typically see when people stick with the work that you give them? Not just the physical stuff that we've talked about. Is there a change in their confidence, in their carriage, their sense of independence? Do you see that as part of the outcome? And if you do, well, how long does it normally take until you start to see that kind of result coming through?
So, how long is what I always tell people. We have to respect the body where it is. I definitely have an idea of where I anticipate people will be. So, when I look at people who are coming in and I work with them directly every single week, I look and I'm going, call it 3 sessions just to even get comfortable on the rebounder, and recognizing that it is a process as well. But in that, it also shows where our weaknesses are and where we have room to evolve. And so, at the end of all the work, I always tell my clients the how committed you are is also how invested I am in your path and your journey. And if something's not working out, I always tell people we have to be honest enough to address that at the same time. There are uncomfortable, conversations, but when I don't see things progressing, it's also my role to call it for what it is. And so the question is, if this is your goal, and my favorite ones are, people who are like, I need to lose weight, and I'm going, great, no problem, but then we can still do something before we get to that point where you're extremely happy. And so, when people get committed, I normally say my clients who are seniors and those who were watching in our clips, you're looking at people who are joining classes 2 times a week. And that's just group classes that are super small but targeted to what our body needs. Because our classes are meant to be small, semi private trainings, if you will, it's because we also want to ensure that people are being corrected based on what they need. And then, further than that, we want to make sure that no one's getting injured. Right. And so in a class setting, they do need our attention, but more so to drive the results that they're looking for. So that's how long does somebody need to participate? Twice a week is amazing. We also have at our center a machine that will really give us an idea about, distribution of weight, their balance, and also their posture in 3D. Everybody always says, I don't want to see myself in 3D. Why? And I'm going, because if we don't set a baseline and we don't create metrics that we can go back and measure, that's my biggest thing for the center. It's putting in, everyone gets afraid of technology, but technology, when used with great intent, is super motivational. Because when I have people who say, I don't have results and I don't see results, it's easy for me to understand because clinically I know what the program is supposed to do. But to have them to buy in, people want to see results. We are in the era, I don't care how old we are in the era of I do something, I expect immediate results. That's unfortunately the loop that we're in with dopamine. That's the effect of dopamine. Um, and so technology helps us measure. If we are not measuring where we are at the beginning versus throughout, it's very easy for people to get demotivated. So we put in place tools and metrics to ensure that we can go through and see the before and the after. A true rebound therapy program, when I work with, even kids, for example, I am focused on specific competencies. So rebound therapy has three levels, if you will, of competencies that everybody should be able to do if we're looking at motor and sensory input. So I know to what extent are we okay. You've moved on and you've completed, quote unquote, the program based on the competencies on where they are, which also means that it's a tool that you can continuously evolve, and not necessarily get stuck, quote unquote. So I think, to ensure that people continue with their programs and get their results, as a coach, as a therapist, my job is to ensure that I've planned their next move, if you will, knowing their capacity as well. And that will, with rebounding, allows me to adjust to where somebody is, to really make them feel like, okay, do I give up now? Do I not? But it does take, at a minimum 3 4 sessions just to feel like, okay, my fear of falling is now gone. I think it does take, and it's a repetitive motion, right? But how the body responds on the rebounder also gives us in the back end more information about what else is going on in the body, which then allows us to really take a deeper look and provide a more personalized approach. And that could look like, what does sleep look like? What does your nutrition look like? How are you moving? What is your hydration like? And I know it sounds silly, but for the majority of the pain and the issues that we're having in our body, water is free medicine, because the majority of the time we don't even recognize how much we're not drinking. And so sometimes, and you can imagine, for people who have parents with dementia, for example, it's as simple as they thought they drank water, but dehydration can be such a real issue. And so something as simple as water can create a lot of change with what they're feeling for pain and inflammation. So it's really coming back down to say, okay, if I have all of this information about this individual, this is great. Now, I am there to make sure that the nervous system responds the way that we want it to. And when it doesn't, then there's another tool that I can use and pull out to help support them. But the goal really is personalized approach. And without that, it, you know, it will look different for everybody. So we adapt to that.
Thank you. Tamara, as we wrap up here, um, if you could say one uncomfortable truth about aging and movement that most people really just don't want to hear, what would it be?
Ooh, the $1 million question. What is it that people do not want to hear? um, I think I think we need to accept that um, it's a process. It's a process, and how do we encourage longevity? It's to start early. It's to start early and to start at any point in time, because there's no age that is too late, right? And in Canada alone, there's such a huge shift. And I think once we accept that we're aging, it's a mind shift. And so the hardest part is accepting that this is where we are today in our bodies. And I like to tell people, mourn every old version of yourself that you're going, I wish I could go back to. I wish I could. And the difference is, if I can sit down in my car and get out of my car without my walker, which means that it's going to take me 2 minutes faster to get into my grocery store, that's the independence that we want, so that they can get there. And independence really looks like whatever that person feels they need to feel like they don't need to depend on somebody. And if we can remove that, amazing. It really allows us to work towards that end goal. And taking out all the fuzz and the haze and the confusion and the overwhelm and the so many different places that we can start. The very first place, acceptance. If we can accept where we are in our current limitations, it opens the door, for free will, but also for you to receive anything that you choose to integrate into your life moving forward that might be unconventional, right? And so it opens the door to say, well, you know what? I don't understand how or why this works, but it works, and I can feel and attest that there's a change within myself. That's that's all we need. That to me is the goal that we should go to, rather than looking at a really big mountain and going, how am I going to cross over that? But it really does come back down to accepting where you are right now in your body.
I think that's really insightful. We all have a tendency of thinking, "Oh, I used to be able to do that. Oh, I used to be able to." Well, sure, but when you were a baby, you could only crawl. You couldn't walk, right? When you started walking, you didn't say, "Oh, I used to be able to crawl." Right. So if we
Right.
if we can, as you say, accept the stage that we're at and the age that we're in, and look forward to, I want to learn how to leave my walker behind. I want to learn how to go for walks that are longer, more strenuous. I want to learn how to get out of my wheelchair and be able to walk. So these are forward looking, and they're positive oriented, as opposed to, we lived our life. You did what you did then. Now let's look at what you're going to do going forward. So I really like that philosophy that you've brought. Tamara, thank you so much. You've helped us all understand that there's simple ways for us to truly age gracefully and at least safely and with positive energy. What you've built here in your studio, it's a reminder that aging doesn't mean shrinking your world. It means learning new ways to stay connected to it. And I also want to thank your clients who have allowed us to enter into their journey and follow them a little bit through the studio. I think with your uh, participation and agreement, I would love to do a follow up with some of the other clients that are showing tremendous progress. And we'd like to be able to see how that comes together. Maybe we could plan a future episode together as well.
It'd be wonderful. Thank you for having me, and I'm available. I know you're going to share my contact information and everything. But the goal, for anybody, the listeners who are going, I would love to start. We need the support, and you don't know exactly what's needed. It doesn't matter. I'm a phone call away. I'm an email away, and I would love to come back and see how people have been using this information, and we'll do another follow up. Absolutely.
Wonderful. We will be including everything in the care toolkit, of course. What I love about what we've seen today is that it isn't about perfection, it's about possibility. We've watched real people with real bodies and real limitations learning how to move with more confidence, more awareness, and more trust in themselves. If you're watching this and thinking, that looks nice, but I could never do that, I hope today showed you that healthy aging doesn't start with big changes. It starts with the small ones, standing a little taller, breathing a little deeper, and believing your body can still learn. It's about meeting it with curiosity, compassion, and the courage to keep moving in whatever way your body allows. As always, if this episode sparked something for you, please share it with your family, your friends, or anyone you care about. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the podcast if you're enjoying what you hear. Thank you for listening in and sharing your time with me. Please join me each week for new insights into aging with dignity and reminding us all, until next time, to age gracefully and live vibrantly. Everything you've heard today, just real talk. It's just our personal stories, experiences, and honest opinions. This podcast isn't providing legal, medical, financial, or therapeutic advice. And no, listening doesn't make me or my guests your lawyer, doctor, financial advisor, or therapist. The guests and I are here to share stories, spark ideas, and hopefully give you something to think about. When it comes to the big decisions, make sure you do your homework or check in with the experts who know your situation best. We're here to keep the conversation going. You're the one in the driver's seat.